duck, and cover.
Hello and welcome to Surviving Classical Music. I'm Andrew Byrne, and joining me today are the dynamic duo of Russian but also Swiss-based flautist,
whatever you like,
Darina Ablogina, and also the Canadian and also Swiss-based harpsichordist and keyboardist, Sebastien Mitra.
Yes.
Welcome, both of you.
Thank you very much.
Also, the dynamic duo, I say because they have this podcast together called Insight Reading Enlightenment, which if you don't know it already, then look in the description of this podcast and you'll find the link to it. Welcome. So it's cool to have another pair of podcasters on here. You guys have been doing quite a few interesting episodes. Now you've done almost 20? 17, I think.
About that.
Something like that.
By now.
I don't count.
But what I find interesting is in this podcast, you guys not only, frequently you have a guest on and you're talking about something which, of course, that guest is an expert in and so on, but it ends up more often than not in a performance.
That's right. We are sight reading together.
Or improvising.
Or improvising.
Sometimes improvising, yeah.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Tell our audience a little bit about how you were inspired to start this project.
Surprise! We were sight reading together.
Yes.
And we decided, it was during the Corona crisis situation. Everybody was depressed and sad. And we were just playing some music together.
I asked you to play in a lesson of
right.
mine.
Yes.
And then I was coerced into no.
Yes. So we decided, why don't we have a podcast? Why don't we sight read together for other people that might be interested in hearing us playing something for the first time and being confused with the musical text and, our impressions, what we get from the text, how we feel about it, what we catch from the musical notation and from the composer's marks. Yeah, this kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm. What I'm interested in this podcast in particular is you have, in one episode in particular, and we already spoke about this beforehand, but I'm bringing it back for this, is you had this interview with, I didn't quite catch it, but I'm pretty sure he's the saxophone professor of the Hochschule, no?
He is a very important man in the contemporary music field, actually.
Markus Weiss.
Markus Weiss. And he's one of the heads of the contemporary music department. And he's a founder of the Zeiträume Festival, actually. One of them. He created and he curated that festival.
So an important person in the contemporary music scene in Basel.
Particularly in Switzerland.
Right.
Yeah, everywhere. And so what would you like to ask?
Well, what I find interesting about that conversation that you have with him, of course, you're talking really about his perspective on music making, and he's coming from a very different place than most of the people who come on this show, actually, who are all early music related or adjacent, because those are the people that we know, that Grace and I know. And he has this interesting take, which is, of course, that he sees contemporary music often as a reflection. It should be, or it is a reflection on society as it is today, right?
I'm not sure about that. I cannot speak for him. As far as I understood, he was trying to maybe bring some new tools in order to fight the system in a way that we are all in this concert hall perspective and in this classical perspective, if you can say so, which was going on since the 19th century. And we feel stuck in this concert hall perspective, in this picture where everybody just is sitting and listening and coughing between the movements, So maybe we could, we were talking about how we could find some tools to bring something new and fresh, maybe sometimes unexpected, into our performance in order to maybe, create new audiences in the halls, in concert halls, or whatever space you want to use for a performance. and to be connected with your audience, these kind of things, because we can profit and they can profit, obviously, and it will be interesting because of course nowadays it's mostly, maybe I will be mean, but mostly old people who go to concerts, and younger generations, they are not interested in that.
Yeah.
I think that was the point of our sorrows.
And in this particular case of the concert that you were speaking with him, or the program, I guess you could say, was where there were, if I understood correctly, 4 independent performances happening at the same time.
Yes.
And people could drink and stand and...
Yes, and even though he was frustrated because people didn't really want to do that, because they were within this frame of the concert idea that they have to sit still and just listen to the music and not even enjoy the wine or a nice environment, conversation with each other, walking. Why not? This kind of experience.
Right. Then I want to pivot here, going into podcasting in general, but we'll come back to this in a second. And I'll ask you, Seb, this because I had asked you already. How do you feel like when you are listening to this sort of discussion? You had said that Darina brings some good questions always, and you're listening to the discussion. What is the experience of formulating a question in that moment?
I mean, I would like to say I don't feel like the podcaster type. I never felt, I don't listen to podcasts. I don't do this. I don't interview people. And so what I try to bring is something that I would always ask, or what I would like to ask in general, as a general question to that person for my own interest, which is a bit selfish. I think Darina is very good with asking the particular questions that are necessary for the podcast to work.
Yeah.
And then I kind of try to always formulate a question from a different angle or a different perspective, something related to what we were talking about, but not necessarily directly like, oh, how did you feel about this music that we just played, et cetera, et cetera. I often ask about their educational practice because a lot of the people that we talk to are teachers. So I say, how do you incorporate whatever we've been talking about into your educational practice or things like this? But I try to actually ask questions that I would be interested in.
Well, actually, me too. I do.
I know. I'm sorry. I was not trying to say that you wouldn't, but I think in the format of our podcast, you take 2 roles, and one is sort of doing like this questions that need to be done, and also your interesting questions, of course. Yeah, but I'm less in that role of talking to the person about what we're doing. I don't know.
Interesting.
Maybe that's a new topic. Maybe we can debrief about this later. But I think that's pretty evident from the dynamic on the podcast if you listen to it.
Because of course in this interview that we've just been speaking about, it was just you.
Yeah, I wasn't there, which is why I was not chiming into this previous conversation because I wasn't there.
Yeah. I guess one thing that I have a hard time with in general in this podcast and is that I have a hard time listening to myself talk. Partly it began with the fact that I used to say a lot of and ah a lot. I used to say it a lot with lots of spaces. And so I always had to edit myself out, edit those spaces out to formulate a sentence that I had actually said, and so that in the end, I became very quickly keen not to speak. So that I didn't have to spend so much time editing myself,
Practical.
But then, as of course this podcast has gone for a long time now, I feel like I continually bring the same things to the table when I have a story to tell or whatever, or an opinion. Like this. If I have to give an opinion, it's not like my opinion has really changed on many topics over 2 years. And that I find difficult. Are you? I mean, you're relatively early in this, but are you a bit worried that you bring the same things, like your opinion on something just keeps coming back?
Well, I wanted to just say in the beginning when we first started recording these podcasts, I could not listen to it. Like I couldn't listen to the podcast. I felt so much cringe actually hearing myself talk about these things, and also trying to. It felt like I was pretending like I had some sort of interesting perspective on music that was different from everyone else, and then we can have a show. So I had a really hard time. And then once I just listened and I was like, oh, actually it's good. We do a good thing. And then I became okay with it.
I don't know. I didn't have that much trouble.
Yeah.
So
No, I did. But I think it's a personal
if I
thing
can
for
say
me.
so. Yes. I understand your point with some additional sounds that you produce while speaking. I think for me, it's my own therapy in a way. English is not my mother tongue, so I can't speak the same way as you do. And I understand that, of course. So I should fight my fear and just speak. If I have some words to say to my audience, and if I would like to do that in general. So I think for me, it has a good consequences, and on my personality, I think. Yeah.
Is this part of your, how do you say, is one of the goals of doing this project also about language?
No,
No,
not
okay.
at all. But I do realize the differences that, yeah, of course, everybody can hear actually. But also the other thing is that we are trying to avoid the concert situation. That's why we are sight reading.
Right.
And it's not a product that you present on stage. Because we can have mistakes, some issues, whatever. Everything can happen for the first time. So that's the goal, to avoid the situation of a perfect product. And just maybe for some people it would be interesting, because here in Basel Kunstmuseum or Music Museum, you can see people playing together, having in iconography you can see this kind of situation, making music at home, you know. And probably they would be sight reading. So there was my a source of my inspiration as well. So it's kind of historical in a way, what we are doing.
I find it also interesting, you know, this particular interview that you made is not the only time where you have interviewed someone or people who are bringing something different, just like in June where we met in Münchenstein, where we, Oren and I, and Oren's team, of which I'm a part of, it's not Oren and I, it was Oren and his team, was live streaming a series of performances where it was obviously, it was like musical theater, but early music theater. And there was actually this funny moment where Thomas Drescher, the director of the Schola, was there helping lift cars and do weird things. I have a photo of it somewhere. And one of the directors of this project said, I'm supposed to be interviewed for a podcast. And then Drescher brought me to him and said, here's Andrew of the podcast. And he's like, no, I don't think I'm supposed to talk to you.
And then you realized you have a little brother.
and so you guys were there. And that I think was very interesting meetup, actually, because they really, I don't know if that video is available to the public, to the general public, but I found that one of the most engaging productions I really ever saw, and I thought anyone would love it, despite, you know, the sort of level of conversation about it, what is a performance to early musicians in general, that it really just brought so much more. And in fact, they did a lot to make the live stream. They tried to make as much engagement as they could using the format, you know. But I thought that was interesting that you had them on. So just to go to this idea of bringing other ways.
It was all so spontaneous. It's always like all the interviews, I think they happen quite spontaneously. Just some people text me, I'm in Basel, I want to come for a conversation. Like, I have 15 minutes.
That was a very fun conversation, and I think it was one of our first field recordings, which was super cool to do.
There's a special moment in this recording, which probably won't make it onto the podcast, but where there was a kind of a big argument about how they could make the live stream engaging, you know, and what could we do, you know, and there's this moment where I think at the beginning and at the end, they walk into the hall through the window of the hall, and then they go walking through the audience, and then they go on stage, and then they do the same thing on the way out. And there's also a moment in the middle of the play where they disperse into the audience to sell tickets or CDs or what, and juggle or whatever, pull a 5 franc coin out the back of someone's ear, you know.
They were selling shots also.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, fantastic. Wonderful.
Yeah, they were selling grappa shots.
Oh, sweet.
So they have this moment, and the main, the big actor, the big kind of director actor guy comes up to the camera and starts trying to sell stuff directly to the camera. And you could see the cameraman behind us kind of going, what do I do? What do I do? Because he was getting so close that you couldn't focus on his face.
Yes.
You know, it was really funny. And I've never like really enjoyed that I was a part of it. And of course I was the one who decided who got to watch what camera. And I was like pushing on that button to watch this. And I was like, this is the funniest thing I have ever done in terms of production.
Yes.
They really did a lot. And there's also this great, sorry, I have to say this one more, where we're at this moment where they're selling grappa and CDs and so on. And this one guy who he opens his coat to show that he's selling watches inside his coat.
Black market.
But the only camera angle we had was from behind slightly. So it just looked like he was flashing people, which made it just as fun, you know, like it made it equally as funny, but from a completely different perspective, you know.
That was Thomas Hooft.
He
was the
oh my
flasher.
God,
Yes, Thomas Hooft was flashing
Yeah,
everyone.
he's definitely suitable for this role. No, they are great. I really like the energy, and they invent a lot of stuff. And I was also following some of their other projects with queer performances and some others. It's really interesting. Highly recommended to watch. They are doing amazing things. I think. I wish in Basel people would be that brave to bring this on stage, and
I'm trying. Yes.
Great.
Sorry.
But here it costs money. I mean, it costs money anywhere. But to do that sort of thing in this city, there are very, very few venues which are open to doing something with, you know, with just inspiration as the
Felt that with
motivator.
Paradise. Definitely, we experienced that.
But I think that's also when you can get creative with your venues.
Mm-hmm.
And that's like, you don't necessarily always have to do it in the big hall, which is what we were talking about before.
Yeah.
I think you can do it in some basement squat, and that's great also.
Yeah.
Like, you know, it doesn't always have to be in Stadtcasino.
Yeah.
It can be your task to curate this particular place. And
Yes, absolutely. And
create
how does the
something.
space
Yeah.
influence also? I think it's
That's a
nice
good
to work with
point.
people that are also want to have your performance for them and not begrudgingly.
Yeah.
Like sometimes that we've experienced now.
yes, but mostly I was meaning the social environment. Maybe they are not ready, or more traditional in a way. You know, you can't mess up with them. Maybe.
In your experience so far, you know, I mean, let me just ask it this way: have you, both of you or either of you, been a part of these sort of alternative venue style productions? Have you done anything?
Not here,
Not here.
but elsewhere.
Mm-hmm. And in that particular case, did you find that the people who came to watch were of a different sort than who would have watched you in a standard venue?
What type of sort?
I mean, like a demographic.
The demographic?
Yeah.
Definitely. Yes, of course. I think people appreciate taking, even if it's classical music, even if you're just doing the typical standard fare, Bach and et cetera, if you take it and put it out of the context that people are normally used to seeing it in, I think people appreciate that a lot, especially young people. And I think one of the issues we talk about is how are we going to get young people? Everyone's old.
Yeah.
But part of that, I think, is...
Pointing at me.
Sorry, because you said that before. Not to,
Everyone's old.
everyone's old. And... sorry. No, but I remember I did a few performances in bars.
Mm-hmm.
And we had like this festival in Montreal where we did it in a bar.
At the Montreal Baroque Festival.
No, we actually made an off festival. So we tried to make a competing festival with the Montreal Baroque Festival, which was great. And it was this guerrilla thing that we did in a bar. It was like 5 hours long. Everyone was drunk.
Nice.
And this was great. And the audience that we attracted were just young people.
Yeah.
And it was amazing.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, so now I want to flip back to this conversation that you had with Marcus Weiss, this interview, where he says something which I don't think is meant to be provocative. I think he's trying to comment on his perspective and really the context of the role of contemporary music in society and so on. But he makes this point where he says that he doesn't say early music, but he says there are people who go around making programs of basically standard classical repertoire. He uses Bach as an example, but I think it could be anyone really who's in the canon or early music. And he calls that, I think he calls it nostalgie programme. He's saying that it's an escape.
Escape from reality.
Yeah, that early music or canonical music in a way is an escape from reality, and that it doesn't speak in a way to people, to society. It's not a comment. It's not commenting in the same way that contemporary music does on society.
Yeah.
And what I find interesting, there are two things. One, I think what he doesn't completely observe is that there's a huge amount of escapism that happens in society today, especially involving the internet. I mean, mostly involving the internet. But the one other thing which I think is interesting and goes into the level of what he calls could be artistry, because he distinguishes the difference between a craftsman.
Okay, now be careful. I have to warn you, contemporary music people are listening to your podcast, because Uli Fusenegger mentioned, also Mike Swoboda, that they were listening to an interview with Kelly.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, well.
Yeah.
They can take it.
Yeah. No. But what I find interesting is that what I think is missing from the concept is the introduction of improvisation into, this whole framework of early music, and how, in fact, that part, I think, adds this whole other dynamic to the performance, where if you, let's say you go into interesting places, you have interesting repertoire, but if you're also introducing improvisation as a dynamic there, I think that really does exceed the sort of craftsman.
Improvisation in what way?
Well, I mean, this is our generation now of early music, like where we are starting to push beyond. This is what they did, like performance practice research and discovering repertoire. Like, we're getting to the point where for many instruments we know all of the repertoire now. There's almost nothing left to be discovered new. Maybe there's still more, of course, I'm not saying, but I'm saying like 90% of for some instruments we just know that this is all that there is, and so you can only perform that the same, like you can only play that and record it so many times before the whole idea of what early music is becomes escapism, because there's nothing, your take on playing the same notes that are written down as someone else's becomes very personal, but does it become relevant in the same way? But I think improvisation is pushing that boundary of, I say improvisation, I mean understanding what was possible back then and incorporating it now, of course with an original take, because what do we know about improvisation from the past? Only what was written down. But I find that an interesting dimension, which is not in the concept of what a craftsman is, which is actually beyond.
But for that, you still need a basic understanding about your craftsmanship.
Yeah. But what I'm saying is it's more than. So you have to have the craftsman status, but it goes beyond that level.
With Marcus, I had an impression that... the contemporary music field nowadays, it's not only playing musical instruments, it's performance. A lot of this aspect is now leading, let's say, this whole movement of contemporary music. You don't have to play an instrument. You don't have to have this basis anymore. Let's say, that's why improvisation, I was a bit confused in what way, in a way of performance or like acting on stage or really improvising on your instrument. So I think it's a completely different perspective he was looking from.
Yeah.
Maybe. Yes, because it's not about your musical instrument. You are not attached to that anymore. We were talking about these cliches also, like a flute player, it's like more, like, I don't know, this posture, a bit proud, and like the violin, and they all look so beautiful, and these hands and these musicians, and it's a cliche in a way. And contemporary music is also an escape from reality in a way to another reality, maybe that is similar or parallel. I don't know, but yes, they are trying to do with some new tools like acting, performing, writing pieces without even notation, with just, I don't know, with a legend that consists of just words or lines or whatever you like. This kind
he had mentioned this a performance within this program where, in fact, it involved two instrumentalists who actually never played their instrument. They were never involved in their
Phoebe
own.
and Maria. I did an interview with them. It's on the website of Zeitraum Festival. I did a little podcast for them, so you can listen to that if you're interested.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
They're talking about they did this performance with like colorful wigs and just tapping on surfaces. It was and it was going on for an hour or something like that. Really interesting concept.
When you began this project, did you conceive of how much work it would be accurately? Did you think this would be less, more, or the same amount of work than it is?
I don't think I had expectations, to be
Same,
honest.
yes.
I didn't know what to expect. I also didn't know how, like, if I'm honest, I didn't know how seriously or how much we were going to actually invest into this. Yeah, but I'm happy we did. But I don't know, probably...
We didn't expect much, no?
I don't think we expected much. And now, how do you feel?
Like now? Or?
Like, how much work do you think we've done for it?
It's difficult to measure in cups. I don't know. Yes, it takes a lot of time to edit the material. But now I think, because I'm doing that, and I have practiced that for a while. So it's not that difficult anymore and doesn't take that much time, especially when I'm editing the speaking part.
Because now we basically do it in one take.
Yes, always in one take.
That's a new thing for us.
I just cut some things that are not relevant, and that's it. I'm not really obsessed with this like parasite words or something. I think I keep them. Sometimes it's nice because...
What words?
Like parasites.
Parasite words.
Like these kind of things, you know, like when you
I see. Yeah. Okay.
listen to yourself anymore. It's or silence or whatever. Yeah. So
I find it an interesting dynamic. I was listening to the Forte Piano 1, which is 2 episodes ago, right?
Yes.
And you guys have a really good dynamic at the beginning. It really goes back and forth.
It was so
actually,
intense.
which I like. That it was so intense.
Yes, because we were talking so much, and at the end we were so tired, and like I don't even know why we did that. Yes, it was exhausting actually. We're like, and let's talk about this and about the instrument and about the piece and about the flute. It was intense.
I have to thank you, Seb, because in that podcast, it's the first ever audio example I ever heard of a bassoon stop.
Yes, you see.
But it's not actually. There's a great recording I can send you in which there's a piece in which they use the bassoon stop in a very great way.
Okay.
I can send it to you.
Okay.
With Isabelle
Please
Faust.
Okay.
Nice.
Because I always, of course, like that. You know, since my bachelor days, is the bassoon. Bassoon stop on this harpsichord. And I never heard it. I never knew what it sounded like. And I think I'm glad I heard it now, like after 12 years of Baroque and historical performance, because I hear why
You are necessary.
But I hear why they call it that. There is a similarity. It's not close. It's not like 100. It's not like wow, that is a direct copy or anything. But I hear the characteristic about it. Why? Whereas if it was like 10, 15 years ago, I'd be like, this is just bullshit.
Right.
You know.
Yeah.
But I do appreciate that was there. I was like, yes!
The piece of tin foil on the strings.
Yeah.
Great.
Yes.
So have you guys gotten at each other's throats? Are you
What?
like
During the podcast?
Yeah.
No.
Because we can't see anything,
No.
right? There's no videos.
We are nice to each other.
Yeah.
You think? Apart from the accusations of how old you are.
Yeah. But yeah, that happened just now. Usually it doesn't happen.
Yeah. We save our fights for other people's podcasts.
He's just stressed, I think.
I'm chilling.
I also noticed that you guys have your own Telegram group for the podcast.
Yeah, we do.
Apparently it's on the decline.
Alas.
It's on a pause, I think. I paused my relationship with the Telegram. So why is it so interesting?
Because I never knew about I knew that Telegram The only reference I have in my life about Telegram is that that's where all of the Corona conspiracy groups are.
Oh.
So like when you guys said I have
We
a
are
Telegram
not-
group, I was like, oh, this is interesting.
We're also QAnon supporters.
I
We're
see,
not.
okay.
Sorry. Just disclaimer. Don't take that out of context.
Yeah. I don't know. We just decided to do because it was something new.
Yeah.
And there are lots of Telegram channels in general, not only for conspiracy and
Yeah, like you can get a bunch of free things, like on commercial marketplace.
yes, free food in Basel,
Free food
food
in Basel,
sharing.
food
Really?
sharing.
Yes.
Yeah, it's actually a great, it's a
great.
great platform also.
Yes.
Okay. I'm like clearly, how do you say, like I'm aging out of the of this sort of stuff. If there's a new platform, I'm like, well, what is this? It's back
just
in
the
my day.
alt-right.
Yeah, yeah.
We were even thinking about a clubhouse because I'm in there, and so I can create a room. But I was, I had some
Clubhouse is an app.
yeah.
Again, you see, like I'm
Yeah, it
too
was
old.
this
I don't even know about
famous app that kind of popped with Elon Musk. I think he advertised. He briefly mentioned that on his Twitter, and then it was like everybody wanted to go on Clubhouse, but you need a special invitation. So it was
Oh.
really popular because
okay.
yeah.
It's like Gmail back in the day. You had to be invited to Gmail
Yeah,
at the beginning. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't
You
remember.
didn't- Okay. This is like 2008 or 2007.
Okay, I was like 10 years old. So.
Ah, okay. No, you could only you if you had an account, you could give like 2 invites, and then and that's how it grew. It became like the Gmail became like quite exclusive for a while, and like, and now everybody has a Gmail.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think it was more. It seems more legit even today than a Hotmail account, for example.
I think
So.
most things seem more legit than a Hotmail.
Really, that's like
Sorry.
all, my email address is a Hotmail account, and I think it's like, well, this is like beginning of the internet.
I mean, it's cool because now everyone has a Live or an
Yeah.
Outlook. No one has Hotmail. I have a Hotmail account, but it's my old one.
See,
So it's very exclusive.
yeah, we Canadians,
Yeah.
Yes.
We're Canadian.
Have some things in common.
Yes.
that's right.
Okay.
There's like,
We
yeah.
can ask you something.
Okay, go ahead.
Oh yeah, because I'm kind of haunted by this word escapism
Right.
because
yes.
I don't really
I also do,
understand
yeah.
why. I would be more inclined to talk about like an archaeology, so like a musical
Oh my God,
archaeology,
yes,
right?
that's very good. That's a very good
Instead
topic, yeah.
of this escapism thing, because in the end, if we're comparing all forms of anything that we do, how is one not escapism and the other one is?
Yes, yeah, I was thinking literally the
Yes.
same with contemporary, whatever music.
It's even, I
art
think
in
even
general.
more an escapism
Yes.
than in early music.
Yeah.
I don't really get that.
I think the difficulty for me in the in raising archaeology as the metaphor for this is that in archaeology you're putting something on display which actually existed, an object or a place or a thing which still exist to a certain amount, and then then the rest of it is a sort of explanation by the experts filling in what your imagination can continue on, and that isn't a performance. And I think one of the difficulties about archaeology and especially early music in general is that I think there could be a conflation as to what the goals are of early music, because if you say early music is an archaeological pursuit as much as it is a performance, then a performance can always be criticized based on what it is not when comparing to what it was. Because there's essentially none of us ever heard the original performance or an original performance, because of course music was performed by different people and they would bring something else to it. But we don't have all of that information even written down. And then therefore there's always a way to say that the performance is somehow not legitimate, because there's just not enough information. And when we play, we also bring our own past, which is from the future, into it. And so therefore the difficulty in comparing it with archaeology is that in fact archaeology is bringing you an object, and there's a room for your imagination to take place, and your imagination is guided, and there's a certain possible criticism about how it's guided, about who knows enough about the object, but that's on a something which actually that object exists, whereas we have paper which exists, and that in itself is an object, but what it's notating is something which is it only exists when you're playing it.
I mean, if you prescribe to sort of more postmodern theories about objects,
yes, yeah,
and most things are objects, including musical performance, I think.
Okay.
Yes, I was also, I wanted to say that it's always a matter of interpretation. Some people consider historically informed performance practice as a tool as an archaeological tool in a way. So they just have this attitude. I think it's always like, yeah, we are all so different. Like everybody's unique.
Yes. And I think I know a lot of people who do fit the profile of the archaeologist more than, let's say, an artist.
Yeah.
And I think that is actually the critique that maybe someone like Marcus could have about early music.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's why I question this escapism thing, because I don't like this word, and also because what are we actually trying to do?
I think this is one of the great unfortunate things about my experience in the Schola versus yours is that my experience, I spent 6 years with Tony Rulli and Evelyn Tubb, who were doing this experimental performance class called Momo.
Oh yeah.
Which you had been to.
I think we met there for the first time actually. Yeah.
And in any case, there was so much emphasis in that class on performance as an art, and not about performance practice. I mean, of course, performance practice always came into it and so on, but the point was, how do you engage your audience? And that was the whole discussion from start to finish. And sometimes if no one wanted to play, then there was a sort of esoteric discussion or something. But I think that's one thing that needs to happen everywhere, regardless of it being early music or not. We have to have this we have to be aware that what we're doing is actually an interaction. And I think that, going to your point about there are people who are more archaeological minded or archaeology.
They're really going for it. It's crazy. Yeah.
But that's definitely, I see that in the very beginnings of the early music movement. I mean, in the beginnings of the counterculture movement, that there's this huge sort of organology. There's people interested in early instruments and playing them, and then as an extension of how did they play them, which like with performance practice sort of thing. And then those guys, so much of the music criticism at the time is like, well, that wasn't done, or what you did there is that's just made up, or the metronome markings don't match, or whatever. And then today, I want to get out of that,
Me too.
Yeah, it's not very interesting. I must say.
Because every performance is always going to be judged based on what you didn't do, or what you couldn't know and you shouldn't have done. Because therefore you're imposing. And I don't know how many times I've listened to medieval music people criticize each other because there's just no information.
Let's not touch this medieval snakes.
But there's so little information on music from then.
No, in a good way.
Yeah, good snakes. For sure.
Yes.
No, we definitely need a new direction.
Direction for what?
I don't know.
No, but again...
What do you mean?
I don't know.
This is the thing that we've been talking about.
No, but again, like this escapism, whatever. I think Marcus maybe meant only repertoire-wise. It's like Bach, and it's always Bach, or Tchaikovsky, or like they always play the same, Yes, and like early music, I don't think he criticized that, because for a long time he actually played with this singer Dominique
Villard.
Yeah. He played, and he recorded some CDs with medieval music on a saxophone, and he was telling me about that. Yes, so it was really interesting. I think he was not like putting us below or like criticizing this movement, but I think I understand his point from my perspective that maybe we're kind of reserved in a way that we don't want to empathize to the pain of the world, because there's so much pain in this world nowadays. It's crazy, the climate situation, everything. It's like, I don't know, some parts of our world are not doing well, and like if we empathize to everybody, we'll die probably. Like we would feel so much pain as we don't have skin, you know. And maybe in this regard Marcus was a bit like, oh, that's always nice to, you know, cover yourself with a Bach blanket and just to be cozy and just but also in Bach's music there is also so much pain you can clearly feel, but for that time probably and their perspective. So I think maybe that what makes it similar in a way, contemporary music and early music. Yeah, because they were maybe speaking about similar things and trying to communicate to the people.
I think this is where talking about performance and a new direction, I think this is where improvisation you can't simply improvise and not think about the reaction of what you're doing. You know, you can't just in isolation look at something and then play some notes and not think about how do I use what I'm doing and try and move someone who's in front of me, you know? And otherwise, then it's just a simple, like it's a technical exercise, sort of. And I'm certainly, when I have introduced improvisation into my own performances, that I am super careful in thinking in advance when I'm sort of maybe mentally preparing something. I am very careful to make sure that what I'm doing has an emotional component in some way, and that is going in the right direction. I think is always thinking about where you're going and what reaction it may elicit. You know, maybe it's not the right.
And I
reaction.
think it was the point of Marcus that it's not enough to be just a musician nowadays, just to play your G major scale and everybody's happy and you play fast and loud. Yeah, this aspect of a performance is important for everybody, I think.
Sorry, I feel more and more that we talk about this discussion that you're defending or his position, and I'm like somehow accusing.
No, yes, maybe. No, but I just I was having this conversation with him, and I don't know, somehow he's a very wise man. Yeah, I felt there was so much wisdom, and I was having the same thoughts. Our thoughts were aligned in a way that, like, he's a person from a different generation and playing different music. Yeah. And I'm different, but we were thinking about the same.
Yeah.
Yeah, in a way.
Do you have this when you talk to people on either in a podcast or in other cases where you talk to someone and they have enough charisma or they have already their sort of reputation precedes them and you sort of know that they're an important person, and so immediately anything that they say you think about and you seriously, and this is not the question. Question is, when you have somebody who's like this, who is a very engaging person to speak to, can they say something which you fundamentally disagree with, but when you hear it coming out of their mouth, you're like, yep?
No, I'm very critical.
Okay.
I can understand maybe everything and try to look at it from a different perspective. But normally, no, you cannot trick me with your charisma.
Okay.
It's not possible.
Okay. But so you'll try and understand where they're coming from.
Yes, of course. And for that, we need a longer conversation. I need to ask questions. They need to answer. Yeah, this to highlight their point. I don't know. I was really wondering, but okay, maybe you can come to our podcast and then we will talk. Yes, about your process and what is behind. Now I'm behind the scenes. I know I can experience that. Yeah, because of course the image that we get when the episode is published and you have a guest and you promote and it looks so, I don't know, it looks great from the outside. But of course there's a lot of work behind that. So I was just wondering, because I'm like, I'm like a psychotherapist. What do you feel about that? Like, how do you feel after having so much work done? And do you feel exhausted, or what is your relationship with the work that you do?
Yeah, I think first of all, since we started doing video, I mean, I can't do this every week completely by myself, number one. And sometimes I do, but rarely. Oren has been behind the scenes making the magic happen. As you guys, nobody is actually going to have seen this, but like we must have sat here for like 20 minutes while he like put the stars shining off of our faces and everything. So that's an extreme help. But of course I do all the editing and I do the whatever promo. You know, I think one of the problems for me is that I want to do this well and I want to have people who I can ask good questions to, but ultimately this is a 1 day a week job for me in which I don't earn any income. We have
Same here.
we have, you know, some generous donors who give us about 45 francs a month, you know, so it pays for your coffee after this, you know. I think one of the difficulties for me is that, yes. Oh, nice. The difficulty for me is that I see so much that I would like to do content-wise. I would like to spend more time preparing for an episode as we go. I would like to spend more time researching guests who maybe could provide us with more objective information rather than only people talking about their own personal experience, which I'm totally happy with. I'm happy with every guest we've had on the podcast. But sometimes it would be nice to, you know, like, because, for example, at the time of recording, Austria has just announced they're going into another lockdown. I would like to talk to someone who's an advocate for musicians' rights and whatever, who could also be, but
I know a person
who's also a fluent English speaker, you know, and that's not always easy to find.
Right.
Because, yeah, so those sorts of things take time, take connections, and you have to sit down and think, who might know the person I need to talk to, you know? And those are things which I just don't have time for. The editing of this video is going to take 2 or 3 hours, and then I have to split it up audio and video format. And then by the time you get to the stage where you're like, where do I advertise this to? You're like, I can't spend more time on this. I have to move on to the money, you know, to what actually earns me any income. So I think that's difficult. I do things as efficiently as I can, and I think in general that I've now found a system where I can, you know, that there's always a little picture with the title and everything, and I find that it's simple, black and white sort of thing, but it works, and I'm quite happy to just leave it at that. But I think one of the problems which is in general problem in the scene, and which we talk about again and again on this podcast, is that we are really constantly reaching our colleagues. And what I really want this podcast to be about is for people who are in their bachelors in places like America, where you have a lot of people who really don't quite have a clue about how life is really going to be. But they're told if they play their scales and they win their 100% on their jury, then things will somehow work out, you know. And that's something which I find that the audience at the moment is a lot of people who are at the end of their masters and are now thinking, oh shit, what comes next? And they end up finding us. They find us also from, you know, we're about 50-50 Europe, US. But the people I would like to reach are just maybe 5 years younger, you know, and that sort of thinking takes weeks. You know, how do I reach those people?
Exactly, the same goes with music, that music has how to reach those young generations.
Yeah. I find it also difficult. I mean, I definitely was part of the problem when I was even doing my master's, but certainly in my bachelor's, is that I would never watch performances. And maybe for Ottawa that was okay. You know, Ottawa doesn't have like the greatest music scene. There are times of the year where there's great.
God bless you.
Exactly. But that's one thing which I find unfortunate, especially when I sometimes see my colleagues. It's like, maybe we should go see this performance. It's like, nah, you know, and that's unfortunate. I find it only even from my context is that I feel like I've missed a certain part of my education, or you know, there's a certain part of my persona or part of my being as an artist, which is actually less because I didn't watch a performance which I blew off, you know, basically. I could have gone to watch it, but I didn't. Years ago, you know.
Interesting.
How do you feel about that? Do you try and like, I've always been told it was to eat, but like to take the opportunity when you can, or are you more relaxed about seeing performances?
About seeing performances? Well, if it's something that interests me, I go with a pleasure, and it doesn't matter which one, contemporary, classical, early music, whatever. Yes, normally I like the social aspect of that, because then you can have a drink with people, you can have a chat, and yeah, I realized that that's my thing. That's why maybe I started a podcast. Yes, so I like these conversations, and I do enjoy listening to somebody's personal experience. That I'm really interested in that, because yeah, it's crazy. Again, we are so unique, but similar in a way, and that's what I'm like. Yeah, it's crazy. I'm shocked about this, like in a positive way. How can it be that we are unique and similar, and we have the same sorrows, the same thoughts, how to survive in our life, in classical music. Yes, how to go on with certain things, with your musicianship, whatever. So yeah, I enjoy going to see performances, but it's not like my goal. Or if I see, there is like Emmanuel Payou performing, I don't know if I would. Yes, maybe I would go, or maybe I can be also chill about it. And let's say, I have seen his performances live, so I don't go. More chill.
Right.
I think.
How about you, Seb?
I love going to see performances. Recently, I've been trying not to go to early music performances. Sorry. Unless I'm playing in them.
Yeah.
That's why.
That's why. I've been trying to go to a lot of theater and a lot of plays, and especially plays that incorporate music into it, specifically because I'm working on some projects in which I'm doing this type of theater and music work.
But are you learning from those performances?
Yeah, I'm learning a lot.
Okay.
Either from what I should be doing, or what not to do.
Come on, but you can be individual. You can just bring something else. You don't have to.
However, it's hard, when you imagine the stage, it's hard to see what actually works in your mind versus what is materializing in front of you. So of course I'm not going to take notes and say, they did this, but to be like, they tried to portray this, and at this scale it worked. So when you had 10 people doing this one thing, that conveyed that message better than when it was just this. So for me, I go to a lot of performances. I also get exhausted from going to performances, so I don't go to a lot, to be honest, specifically for the social aspect, because I don't like the social aspect.
Really?
Yeah, I hate talking to people like after concerts and things like this. Sorry.
Okay. I had a different impression.
Yeah, I think part of that is acting, and this
It's a performance after a performance.
In a sense, I mean, this is maybe a pessimistic view, but I think that when you're in classical music or when you're in any performing art, like your performance doesn't end on stage. Like, and I know that sounds really disingenuous, but it's not all wrong.
Yeah.
Like the performance continues outside of the stage, and this I have a really hard time with. So.
I mean, I know exactly what you mean, and we talk about it. We just don't talk about it in that term, or in those terms, where you have people who are like, how are you doing? I'm so busy. I've got so many projects.
Exactly.
Yes.
And you're like, that's a performance.
Girl, chill out.
Social media it's the same thing. Yes. Everybody.
No, but girl as an umbrella term for like all genders.
Yeah.
But we talk, Darina and I specifically, we talk, well, because we're good friends also, we talk a lot about this social media, like exhaustion and anxiety. And like for a while I didn't have Facebook, and Darina was very upset because I couldn't share the post. I was like, I can't have Facebook right now. Darina, I cannot have Facebook or Instagram right now, because it's very exhausting to see all these people, and it's a total...
I think this is but one of the real problems of these social media, like that, especially Instagram, Facebook, like this whole thing is being built around, we are only showing this to the people that you talk to regularly, and then if you want to see more, you have to pay us. And so what happens is that we only see what our colleagues are doing, and when we post, we unintentionally only post to them. You know, like that.
Of course, absolutely.
And and there are ways around it, maybe not necessarily money-wise, but it requires spending a lot of time on social media, like creating posts and taking photos and that sort of thing. If they see you posting regularly, they may show it to other people, but that's such a buzzkill for us, especially during a month like for me. It'll be next month, December. I have no performances, and
no, we play in a Gottes.
Oh, we have one.
Sorry.
Yeah, one. But you know, I just know that I have to be like pretty careful not being on there all the time, because at some point it will bum me out that other people are like, oh, I'm so thankful to have a performance, and it's like you know,
it's so frustrating. It's almost And also, I think the worst part about it is that the feed doesn't help, because the feed is not representative of each individual person's career. It's an amalgamation of everyone's career that then becomes one person in your little, you know,
the other,
in your little monkey brain.
Yeah.
And it's just this one figure that has all these gigs.
Not true. You nothing. But, the sad thing is that most people are doing the one thing that they have right now, but you just, as you say, you just see all of it happening.
You project it otherwise.
But I was also thinking about this negative aspect of performance, like when we were kids and we were just starting our way to stage, like how we were educated in that way, because like I'm coming from Russia, and this famous Russian school and method when you are just constantly humiliated and told that you're just shit, right? And there are so many other people that do that way better than you, and it's tough. So, and for you, for instance, I don't know, maybe you have some more chill
I think in Canada,
ways
I don't know about your personal
deal with
Canadian
your
experience, but
negative experience in the past.
No, I was just going to say, I think versus Russia, Canada is a very chill place. And in my musical education, it was always thumbs up. You know, it was never like, you're bad.
Yeah.
Because for me, it's like, sometimes it's really difficult to go on stage because there is so much of a negative experience and memories. And like, I have to deal with it somehow every time. It's very stressful for me.
I think the culture is positive in Canada. I mean, from my experience, my upbringing. I do appreciate, though, I had a Romanian theory teacher who did everything in, it's Bucharest, the conservatory there. And she, you know, she sort of escaped the communist sort of thing. And she was like serious Russian school. And I was never allowed to do an examination unless she had examined me first. And I had to get 100% before I could do the real exam. And all sorts of really interesting, different perspective, you know, just this one little channel in my life. But if I didn't have her for those, 3 years, that I would have never excelled in any of my academics. And I always ended up, you know, relatively high up in my classes. And it was her. And it was basically this mindset of you begin at 100%, and every failure you make, you take 1 point away. You know, so if you got 90%, 98%, then you failed twice, you know. And it was an interesting... Healthy. I know, it doesn't seem healthy. And sometimes when she would do an exam of mine, you know, it would be covered in red marker. And she would always... Whenever she'd correct, she would switch pens to the red one, you know?
Oh, no.
And she would cover it in red. And she'd look at this. It's bleeding. It's bleeding. It's because of you.
Yes.
And it's embarrassing. But but she instilled this idea that I was perfect, and it was only my actions which made the result imperfect.
So you should come prepared, like 140%, or better 200% prepared to the examination.
And I later did university exams where I knew the material so well that I could, at the end of the exam, I would go through all the questions and say, yeah, I got a 98 because I don't know the answer to those two questions. And in the end, I got a 98. You know, like I was so well prepared.
Weird flex.
Because of this experience, you know?
Yes.
And so but it only worked for me because the majority of the experience was positive.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yes.
If everyone was like that, I'd be like, I quit. You know,
yes,
I'll find something else.
Yeah, it's difficult.
Okay.
But a very, very interesting window into what it's like on the other side of the world.
Right.
For me, it was.
Yes, definitely. Yeah.
So thank you very much, Darina Ablogina
Thank
and
you.
Sebastien Mitra. And if you have any questions for us, you can send us an email at survivingclassicalmusic@gmail.com. All of the links are in the description below. You can also find the link to their podcast. So check it out. And don't forget to subscribe to the podcast. If you haven't already, send us a rating and a review. That would be great too. And take it easy. Thanks very much for watching. See you later. Bye-bye.
See you.
Peace and love.